Over the pandemic, a lot of artists sparked mainstream attention, such as Chloe and Halle, Dua Lipa, and Jasmine Sullivan. In a normal functioning society, these artists would have gone under the radar, but everyone being forced to sit at home and consume media all day gave these artists the recognition they deserve to truly jumpstart their career. And out of that rubble of pandemic eras came Zara Larsson with Poster Girl, her comeback album after a 4-year hiatus. And this era for her really seems to be a campaign for It Girl. For many of you who may be watching, you probably already have an idea of who Zara Larsson is if you were actively listening and consuming music in 2016 through 17, where she did kind of seem like an it girl with her debut era. And you're probably asking the question, why isn't Zara an already it girl? Well, today I want to explore how Zara Larsson was the almost it girl and further examine why she should be nominated for it girl status alongside Chloe and Nomadi, and how she has proved with her new album she is far from forgettable. 2017 was a weird year for music. It truly seemed to be the year of the untalented. 2017 was a year of people who were everywhere all of a sudden because they had a popular musically sound. While we weren't quite yet in the era of streaming music running the Billboard charts like today, we were in the very beginning of it, where we were seeing the BB Rexas and Ariana Grandes reach massive streaming success, and that moderately reflect on the Billboard Hot 100. But out of that weirdness came something great, Zara Larsson. Zara Larsson would truly come out of nowhere in late 2016 and early 2017, when it seemed like to me, the music industry was relatively quiet, as all the greats had already came and conquered, such as Beyonce with Lemonade, Adele with 25, and Justin Bieber with Purpose. I would first notice Zara Larsson when her music video Never Forget You would randomly pop up on my Explore page, and after watching the video, it was kind of clear that there might be a new it girl on the horizon, and in a blink of an eye, it seemed like my theory was right, and before I knew it, I was getting recommendations for other of her music videos, such as Symphony, Lush Life, and Ain't My Fault. But Zara Larsson, like many artists that would come out between that time period, are part of what I like to refer to as the 2016 through 19 curse, where most artists that would debut during that time period would see their careers rise and fall between those years. Examples include BB Rexa, Elisa Carr, and Jessie Glenn. And Zara Larsson is sort of affected by that curse, but not as bad as other artists. Zara Larsson, in my opinion, has quite an interesting background, in the sense that Zara Larsson had already been an established star in Sweden, and was arguably marketed as a Sweden pop star wanting to make it big in America. And that line alone was enough for me to see what made her so popular. A little background on Zara Larsson. Zara would win America Got Talent in Sweden at 10 and would garner an official recording contract at 14 after winning the show. And within that contract, she would start recording her debut EP. And the EP would end up being released on December 9th of 2012 and reach massive success. The EP would peak at number 1 on the Sweden digital charts, the Sweden official recording charts, and in Norway. And her lead single to the EP, Uncover, would be certified platinum 2 months after its release, due to its music streams being over 5 million. And 4 months later would go 3 times platinum, something that would almost prove vital in the jumpstart of her career in America. Personally, I think what's interesting about Zara Larsson is that she already had a backing in the music industry, which is vital for any it girl who expects to make a bang so early in their solo career. Beyonce had Destiny Child, Janet had the Jackson 5, and Whitney Houston had her mother. And Zara will follow up with that success by releasing a debut album called One, that will also go platinum in Sweden and reach the top 40s in Denmark and Norway, along with peaking on Sweden charts at number 1 and giving her 2 top 10 hits with Carry You Home and Rooftop, and 1 top 40 single with Bad Boys, along with another double platinum single with Carry You Home. Personally, there isn't a lot about this release in English, but it seems like from what I have read that her debut album was a fantastic release, considering she was doing numbers like that underage and a solo act as well. So it wouldn't be a surprise when Zara will follow up her newfound success with Uncover, an international EP 2 years later that would be released in the US that would consist of songs from her debut studio album One, and would be released a year after her debut studio album in Sweden. And Uncover would basically give Zara the jumpstart she needed to break through to America. Her EP Uncover was about her first international success, Lush Life. Lush Life would be Zara's second number one single in Sweden, as well as go platinum 4 times at just 18, something that her idol Beyonce also accomplished, which we will come back to later, because where there is an it girl, Beyonce's name always follows. And the next month, she would drop what a lot of people probably know her for, Never Forget You, with the singer Mink, the second single off her soon-to-come debut album at the time, which would be Zara's third number one single in Sweden, reached number 3 in Australia and number 5 in the United Kingdom. On top of that, it would be certified platinum in Sweden after only 2 weeks, and she would release 5 more singles throughout her debut era, including Symphony featuring Clan Bandit, which would be her 5th number one song in Sweden, along with peaking at number 2 in the United Kingdom and 4 in Australia. What I personally enjoy about Zara Larsson's debut era is that it was obvious by the rollout of the album that she had her label completely backing it, which is even more of a giveaway that her record label was lining her up to be the next it girl. She did a bunch of interviews, released multiple singles before as well as after the album, and did performances to promote singles, something that at the time was starting to become taboo due to the rise in streaming services and the downfall of television. But there were still some things about her debut era that were sloppy, in my opinion, and stopped her from shooting straight to the top. While Zara's United States debut album reached massive commercial success, the music rollout for the album itself was a disaster. Zara's debut album just kept being pushed back, like oh my god. The album was originally supposed to be due on May of 2016, 5 months after the release of I Would Like, a promotional single for the album, but would be delayed after the entire album was scrapped, due to her unpleasant time with working with Dr. Luke, referring to him in an interview as a douchebag and not easy to work with. And lucky for her, that would prove to be a smart move, as a couple months later, after cutting him from her album, Kesha Lawsuit would drop, and a lengthy album rollout never ends well for an artist, especially a debut artist. It is simply just a rule of thumb. You never wait too long. It is so easy to lose momentum in a career that way. Personally, I think a lot of people were looking forward to her debut album to be coming soon after the release of her very successful single Lush Life, but would lose interest as it would just take too long to actually get. And personally, I think it looks tacky when an artist has 5 singles out and no album. And to elaborate, truly I think it risks the credibility of an artist's career, as it begins to look like a single junkie, and an artist that is more known for their singles rather than her artistry entirely, such as album, tours, singles, and errors. Examples include Chris Brown, Kehlani, and Tiana Taylor, and that would basically be Zara's career for the next 2 years. 2015, we would get the Uncover EP, Never Forget You, and Lush Life. 2016, we would get Ain't My Fault, I Would Like, and Girls Like. So she was doing Normani things before Normani was, with Zara having 11 songs in total before her first US debut album would come out. And I know what you're thinking. Maybe her singles didn't do so well, so they wanted to build more hype around her before they released the album, thus releasing singles over a span of years to build hype, because you can only debut once. But I'm gonna stop you right there. Sure, single-wise, outside of Never Forget You on the Billboard Hot 100 weren't a success, but streaming-wise, she was doing numbers. All her singles did over 100 million streams. All were top 20 chart toppers on the United States Spotify charts and charted even better on the global Spotify charts. Not to mention, Zara charts amazingly in her home country, as mentioned before, as well in other countries, with 3 of the singles from her international debut album release reaching double platinum or more, in more than 3 countries. Not to mention, Lush Life going diamond in her home country. And keep in mind, this was all occurring before the actual release of the album. And she didn't do too bad sales-wise in the United States either, with her singles going platinum or higher in the States. And to top it all off, she was on the list of 30 most listened to people on Spotify at the time, which was huge at the time, considering streaming, as I keep mentioning because it cannot be forgotten, was still new, in the sense that the music community was still questioning whether streams should count towards the Billboard Hot 100. So the fact that she was charting on the Billboard Hot 100 off streams alone was amazing, and truly put all eyes on her. It is also why I don't consider her a Billboard flop necessarily, as some may label her, as physical sales were still a major contribution on whether your song charted high at the time. And did I mention the awards, such as Zara winning Artist of the Year in 2017 at the Grammys, the Sweden versions of the Grammys, on top of the 7 nominations she would rack up back to back since her debut, along with 3 MTV Europe Awards and a Bravo Auto, one of the biggest awards in Germany that has been given to Beyonce, Britney Spears, and Taylor Swift, all before her album would actually be released, like an icon. And you're probably asking, well, if it wasn't because she was flopping, why did her album keep being pushed back? Well, the answer is quite simple. It's because of Beyonce. Yes, you heard me, Beyonce. You see, 2015 through 16, as previously mentioned, was the year of the greats. And Zara mentioned in many interviews at the time that her record label was very hesitant about releasing the album, with competition like Beyonce's Lemonade, Adele's 25, Justin Bieber's Purpose, and Rihanna's Anti. Thus is the explanation of why she never had a coherent date of when her international debut album would be released. But we also have to consider that Zara was coming up in a time where physical album sales were steadily declining, but still being held as an requirement for artists if they plan on having a top spot on the Billboard charts, which is what I think is another factor on why the album kept being pushed back. Sure, Zara did well in physical sales when it came to singles, but there was no guarantee that it would run over onto album sales. I feel like anyone that is even a little bit of a music junkie knows that it is much easier for artists to sell singles than actual albums. Thus comes the comparison of artists that haven't sold nearly as many albums as they have singles. I feel like a good example of this is Rihanna. Let's look at Rihanna's Loud, which only went platinum at the time of its release, but it has single sales for the album of double platinum. And even to this day, with the album now having a certification of 3 million units, the singles have still surpassed the album sales, with What's My Name and Only Girl in the World each selling 3 million more than the album, and S&M selling 2 million more. I guess what I'm trying to say is that despite Zara's success in single sales, there was still very much a possibility with her being a fairly new artist, at least in America, and existing in an era as a mainstream artist where streaming services allow people to be able to consume music without actively having to buy it, that she could very much flop. In the sense of she could do fantastic in streaming, but flop on the Billboard chart due to lack of physical sales. And it should also be noted that these factors were very much the key to success when referring to those specific albums, as previously mentioned. Beyonce, Rihanna, and Adele not only had fantastic streaming numbers, but they also had big physical sales for the time period. So it would make perfect sense on those grounds alone why the record label would want to push back the album, since Zara hadn't built a big enough fan base to guarantee physical sales. And truly, it was rather smart to wait till those odds weren't against her to release the album. But while that was a smart strategy, it didn't stop the constant pushback of her album from looking any more tacky, since she was everywhere during the time. But nonetheless, we would finally get the album on March of 2017. And the album was a hit. The album would go number 1 in her home country and hit top 10 in 7 other countries. Not to mention, she debuted at 26 on the Billboard 200, one position above Adele's 25. And her album would spend 23 weeks on the Billboard 200 and give her the record for the second biggest debut album by a female artist on Spotify ever. She would garner great reviews, and in October, she would go on her solo 22-show tour for the album. I think this album did exactly what she intended to do. Zara expressed a lot in interviews of not exactly having a fleshed out sound for herself at the age of 18, and that she intended to make good music and not put out a coming of age album that was expected of her as a young woman in pop. And the critics agreed, with the 76 Metacritic score and reviews that compare her to Rihanna, along with acknowledgement of the versatility and full potential Zara shown throughout the album, being praised for her strong and unique vocals with standout tracks like I Would Like, TG4M, and One Mississippi, showing everyone just how bright the future could be for the rising pop star. Personally, I think the album is a little underproduced and does not have a theme whatsoever, but no artist's first debut album ever does. Debut albums are meant to just spawn hits, They're not meant to define who you are artistically in your music, because no one can do that with one single album. And Zara's debut album is definitely a testament to that. I think if you were thinking about revisiting Zara's debut album, I would definitely encourage it, as it is a great nostalgic listen. And while still in the midst of a pandemic, she would release her best body of work yet, Poster Girl, her comeback album after a 4-year hiatus. A fun, pop diva-ish album that walks through the ups and downs of love from a pop girl perspective. That takes you on an orgasmic listen through an array of addictive bops, such as Poster Girl, Right Here, and Love Me Land, being applauded for its well-craftedness and being an undeniable fun pop album. She almost revitalizes comeback albums in a world where they just suck. And it has been a minute since I have seen a very well-crafted pop era like this, and it is so refreshing, with the album having much more direction than her last work in terms of lyrics and album aesthetic, proving that pop can have meaningful direction without touching politics, a true testament that pop isn't dead. While the album isn't a distinctive change from what we're used to from Zara, it is a slight progression in the right direction. This is every good sophomore album, adding what we already love about the artist with something new. A career choice I love, as it gives her more longevity, and I can't help but appreciate that she's opting for a slow burn pop career, where the artist changes over time, rather than ever changing eras each album, because that doesn't work for everybody and has become mediocre in a world where everyone is doing it. And my love for this album is just amplified, as she has complete control of her music, with her music now being released under her own record label, along with acquiring and owning future masters, proving that artists put out their best bodies of work when they don't have record labels controlling the narrative. Just look at the era of Beyonce's self-titled. This era for Zara alone has shown everyone watching that she isn't some rundown one-era it girl trying to revitalize their debut success or just abandon their debut song altogether for a failed attempt at a genre switch. But rather an artist capable of being well fleshed out and not some copy and paste pop star, an artist able to keep up with the ever-evolving music trends of pop, while also positively adding to the evolution of the sound of pop in a way that is distinctively her, something that is truly exciting. Poster Girl, I think, is a testament to a time in pop when non-minority pop artists actually tried in the eras, and I can't help but applaud her for committing to having a proper pop album rollout, especially in today's era of music, especially when it comes to singles. Now, I'm not opposed to artists being able to release what they see fit, because that is what the greats like Whitney, Michael, and Janet has worked for. The right for artists to be able to release music that's true to them, without the pressure of sales and mainstream success. So I can never truly hate the mainstream pop girls for that. But we all have to admit, singles nowadays tend to not be the best songs off the album anymore, like they used to be, and that's something that Zara Larsson, especially with this album, does not fall victim to. I love how she gets that singles should be released under the notion of being a number one hit, not pleasing people's creative niche. With this album, the critics agree that while it's not a perfect no-skip album, once you have a track that you like, it is hard to set it down. And it is a perfect progression to the pop star, with this era defining that she should be in the nomination for It Girl. With a Metascore of 72 and a user score of 80, with a cute little award ranking for the 30 most talked about albums of 2021, proving that there's only a matter of time before she's a top girl. And I'm here to say I called it first.